God of War 6 might finally be in development. We just got some details from industry insider Jason Schreier, who revealed some details about what Cory Barlog's next project is, and it's not the sci-fi game. So that begs the question, what is Santa Monica Studios working on? Will it be the next God of War game? Will it be a newer IP? We're going to talk about all that stuff and more, guys. We have a lot to cover, so check the video chapters for easy viewing, and let's get started. So jumping straight into it, in a series of posts on Reset Era, Jason Schreier addressed the speculation about Sony Santa Monica's next game, which we know is being directed by Cory Barlog, who was the creative head of God of War 2018. Now this is of course in contrast to the previous rumors that we've heard that Cory Barlog is working on a sci-fi game that's a new IP. Well, according to Jason Schreier on his Reset Era posts, where somebody asked him the question, do you have any information on the development status of Cory Barlog's game? Is it progressing well? To which Jason Schreier responded, Cory Barlog's game is Sony Santa Monica's next big thing. Last time I spoke to anyone about it, a month or two ago, it was going well. The thread continued with Jason Schreier posing this question, why does everybody think Barlog's next game is a new IP? Which of course somebody responded and said, I think it's because the previous rumors around it were that it was a sci-fi game, which would remove God of War from the equation. Perhaps an older PlayStation IP is coming back then. Now in the post God of War 2018 interview, he actually mentioned that he wanted to release a sci-fi game that was all of his work, making it a brand new IP, but according to Jason Schreier, it's not a new IP. He then posted, I don't know why the internet is melting down because I asked the question, why people think a video game is a new IP. And it's like, well, for the longest time, we thought that the game that he was working on, the sci-fi game, was a never before seen IP, but the fact that it's not puts everything that we've heard about Barlog's next game into question. Like, if it's not a new IP and it's an established IP, what could it be? Is it like God of War 6? Will it be a sci-fi game from the past, like from like the PS2 or PS1 era? It begs so many questions we're going to dive into, but Jason Schreier then continued on and said this, I'll put it this way, it's not a new IP, but it might feel like one. Maybe that's why people are confused. Please don't ask me more questions about this. If I end up reporting more information at any point in the future, it'll be in an article, not on a forum. And then he said, I can also confirm that Ashong knows what they're talking about, and that sci-fi stuff that people have apparently believed for years now is nonsense. So yeah, with that being said, it sounds like all of the sci-fi stuff and the trademarks we've seen was all for the Intergalactic the Heretic Prophet, which is Naughty Dog's next game. So yeah, that tells me that whatever we're getting for Cory Barlog's next game has to be something that is an established IP. It's not a sci-fi game. The most likely candidate is a continuation of the God of War universe. Jason Schreier said that it might feel like a new IP, which that tells me that it will be a significant departure from the series in the established, format of the series. Now, the first thing a lot of people are going to go to is like, okay, this has got to be God of War 6. It's going to be a soft reboot of the franchise, which does have a history of, rebooting itself, even though it's like a soft reboot in terms of gameplay. It's not really like a reboot in terms of story. God of War 2018 is when we got the, shift from Greek mythology to Norse mythology, which of course changed how the gameplay worked and, the whole concept of it. Now, we also know that Santa Monica is currently exploring doing a 2.5D Metroidvania style game like that. I believe we're going to be getting a God of War game that is Metroidvania, but that is of course not Cory Barlog's next big thing. I think the most likely scenario is that the next game will be about Atreus. And before you say I'm crazy, like, oh, the Atreus spinoff, here we go again. I don't think it's an Atreus spinoff. I think it's a Loki spinoff. I think the game that Cory Barlog is working on is the God of Mischief, the Loki game. I mean, it's been sitting in front of us for the longest time. If you guys remember, Cory Barlog told Eric Williams, who was the director of God of War Ragnarok, that 3 things must happen in God of War Ragnarok. Those being Ragnarok must happen. The next thing is Atreus must leave, which as we saw at the end of God of War Ragnarok, Atreus chose to depart and go on his own journey, specifically in search of the remaining giants, which I mean, that alone sets up the potential for an Atreus focused narrative in the future, or rather a Loki focused narrative in the future. And then finally, the last thing that Cory Barlog said had to happen, which spoiler alert if you guys have not played God of War Ragnarok, even though I've already, spoiled some other things already, but the last thing was Brock must die. Cory Barlog mentioned that the death of Brock, the dwarven blacksmith, was a pivotal point that had to happen for the Ragnarok story. And of course, Eric Williams and the rest of the team at Santa Monica, you know, they hit on all those points. But my question is why? Is it related to, you know, God of War 6? Is it because the story beats are, you know, particularly Atreus' departure, are needed for the conclusion of the Norse saga so that Cory could tell a story for, you know, God of War 6 with Kratos? Or is it because of the God of War spinoff, the God of Mischief game that Cory's working on? Now, I know some people, you know, weren't major fans of Atreus from the God of War series, but I personally think he's awesome, and I think a Loki game would be really sick. Like, the narrative is already set up. Like, we know that, you know, Atreus is going off with Angrboda to find the remaining giants, and like that right there is the start of the narrative and the start of a new franchise. Obviously, Loki is like, you know, in God of War Ragnarok, but they clearly can go in the direction of, you know, having Loki as the main character in a new spin-off series. Like, I can already kind of see the artwork like in my head, and I'm just imagining like the logo God of Mischief. And I don't know if you guys have seen what Sunny Suljic looks like nowadays, but he looks pretty similar to an older Loki. He's got the longer hair now that's black hair, and he's also been working on something for a couple of years now that, you know, we have no idea what it is, but he was working on something in 2023 where he posted he was getting sturdy offset, which honestly, if this is like the case that he's actually working on something that is like God of Mischief or whatever, and this is how we find out that he's working on something new, like that would be absolutely wild. Hopefully that's the case, because again, I am totally for a God of Mischief game, especially if they, you know, change up the gameplay for how, you know, Atreus played in God of War Ragnarok. Obviously, those were some of my criticisms. I wasn't like a major fan of Atreus's gameplay in that game. I thought it was solid, but I think that there's still a lot of stuff that they could do to improve on the gameplay to make it, you know, pretty interesting. Now, it could be that Santa Monica Studios is working on something entirely different. It might be that they're just working on a new God of War game, perhaps God of War 6, where the game takes us to a new mythology and we get the continuation of Kratos' story. But I mean, after Valhalla, you know, him sitting on the throne, I feel like Santa Monica Studios is pretty much telling us that they're going to take a break on God of War for a bit, at least in terms of like the mainline series, and then do something else on the side, while also delivering us like spin-off games like the God of War Metroidvania game that is currently in development, or that's what's rumored. So yeah, with that being said, what is going to be next? Like, what are we actually going to get from Sony Santa Monica? Obviously, we have the God of Mischief game that I mentioned. There's obviously God of War 6 with Kratos going to the next mythology. And now we know there's not going to be a sci-fi game in development, which is actually kind of wild. I genuinely thought the Cory Barlog's game would be that sci-fi game. But according to Jason Schreier, it's been confirmed that the studio is not venturing into sci-fi or creating a new IP. So unless there's like some hidden franchise that I'm missing, the next likely scenario is that the next game will involve God of War. It doesn't have to be God of War specifically, but it will involve God of War. Now you might think, like, what if Jason Schreier is wrong? Well, I'll say this: Jason Schreier has a pretty good track record when it comes to, you know, getting things correct. Like, he usually doesn't run on a story unless he has a source that is firsthand. Like, he won't run a story that he doesn't like truly believe in. At least that's how it's been lately. So for now, the God of War franchise appears to be poised for a pretty interesting next chapter, one that could go in two directions: either God of War 6 with Kratos or God of Mischief with Loki. In my opinion, I'd love to see what Santa Monica would do with the Loki type story. I mean, Jason said it himself, it might feel like a new IP, which God of Mischief would feel like a new IP, but it wouldn't be. It would be a continuation of Atreus' story, as well as exploring an all new story. I'm just kind of picturing this, like, you guys remember the mission in God of War where they were at the giant's house? Like, imagine the entire game is like that. Like, that would be absolutely insane, but it's really hard saying what they plan to do. Either way though, guys, let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comment section. Do you want God of War 6? Do you want to see a God of Mischief game? If you enjoyed my coverage, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe with your notifications turned on so you're not missing out on any future gaming news. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.